Maya had always been a free spirit, someone who loved to explore new places and meet new people. She had spent years traveling the world, moving from city to city, working as a freelance photographer. Her life was filled with new experiences, exciting challenges, and unforgettable memories. But despite all the excitement, she often felt a sense of loneliness, a quiet yearning for something deeper. One evening, after a long day of shooting in the city, Maya found herself in a small hotel room in a place she had never been before. The walls were adorned with muted artwork, and the soft hum of the air conditioner was the only sound in the room. She unpacked her bags, tired from the day's work, and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. There was something comforting about the anonymity of being in a new city, a place where no one knew her. The phone on the nightstand rang, breaking her from her thoughts. It was the hotel's front desk, offering a ride to a nearby restaurant. Maya hesitated for a moment, but then accepted. A few minutes later, a car pulled up outside her window and the driver, a man named Alex, was waiting for her. Alex had been working as a taxi driver for years, driving tourists and locals alike to various destinations around the city. He knew the streets like the back of his hand, and his calm demeanor made him a favorite among his passengers. He wasn't particularly tall, but there was something about him that drew people in. His easy smile, his deep voice, and his quiet confidence made him memorable. When Maya stepped into the car, she noticed how different he was from the drivers she had encountered before. He didn't engage in small talk or try to impress her with stories of the city. Instead, he simply asked if she was comfortable and if she had a particular route in mind. Maya appreciated the simplicity, and the silence that followed was peaceful. As they drove through the streets, Maya found herself looking out the window, lost in her thoughts. She had been so focused on her work lately that she hadn't taken time to appreciate the beauty around her. The city was alive, full of energy and possibility. The glow of the streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, creating a dreamlike atmosphere. When they arrived at the restaurant, Maya thanked Alex for the ride and stepped out of the car. She hadn't intended to stay long, but something about the evening made her want to linger. She asked Alex if he had any recommendations for things to do in the area, and he offered to show her a few places after his shift was over. She agreed, and they exchanged numbers, promising to meet up later. After dinner, they met at a small bar near the hotel. Maya found herself drawn to Alex's easygoing nature. They talked about their lives, their dreams, and their travels. Maya shared stories of her time in different countries, while Alex spoke of his childhood and the reasons he chose to become a taxi driver. There was an undeniable connection between them, something unspoken but felt deeply. Later that evening, as the night grew late, Alex offered to take Maya back to her hotel. She accepted, and the two of them drove through the quiet streets, the city now dim and peaceful. The atmosphere in the car had shifted, and there was a new sense of closeness between them. Maya felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. When they arrived at the hotel, Alex parked the car and turned to Maya. There was a brief moment of hesitation before he spoke. "I'm not sure what you're looking for," he said quietly, "but if you ever want to talk more or just enjoy a quiet moment, I'm here." Maya smiled, her heart racing. "I'd like that," she replied softly. They walked into the hotel lobby together, exchanging light conversation. Maya couldn't help but feel the chemistry between them, and she knew that something had shifted in the air. They reached her room, and as they said their goodbyes, there was a lingering moment before she turned to walk inside. But instead of leaving, Alex stepped closer, his hand gently brushing hers. There was an understanding between them, a silent agreement that whatever happened next would be shared between two people who were no longer strangers. Without words, Maya led him inside, the door closing softly behind them. The room was dimly lit, and the silence between them felt comfortable, no longer awkward or uncertain. Maya could sense the tension in the air, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a natural progression of the evening they had shared. As they sat down on the bed, their eyes met, and in that moment, everything else faded away. Their connection was undeniable, and neither of them had to speak for it to be understood. The energy between them was electric, and as the night unfolded, it was clear that the bond they shared was something neither of them had expected, but something they both felt deeply. The evening was quiet and intimate, filled with understanding and a mutual appreciation for the moment they had found in each other. As the night drew to a close, Maya and Alex both knew that their time together, while brief, was something that would stay with them long after they parted ways. The city outside continued to hum with life, but in that moment, in the quiet of the hotel room, it was just the two of them. And for Maya, it was a reminder that sometimes the best connections happen when you least expect them. As the hours passed, Maya and Alex found themselves in a quiet rhythm, the kind that doesn't require words to be understood. Their conversations had shifted from the superficial to something deeper, more personal. Maya shared bits and pieces of herself that she hadn't told anyone in a long time. Her fears, her hopes, the moments of vulnerability she usually kept hidden beneath the confidence of her independent persona. Alex, too, opened up. He spoke about his childhood, about the struggles he had faced growing up in a small town, and how he had come to appreciate the solitude of the night shifts. He told her how being behind the wheel gave him a sense of control, a temporary escape from the chaos of the world around him. It was clear that while his job was often thankless, it was also his way of grounding himself, of finding moments of peace in the midst of his own uncertainties. Their laughter echoed softly in the room, but it was the quiet moments between their words that seemed to carry the most meaning. Maya felt a warmth she hadn't realized she was missing. It wasn't the kind of connection you force or search for. It was the kind that happened unexpectedly, a quiet bond that formed over shared silences and fleeting moments of understanding. Eventually, the world outside the hotel room seemed to fade completely. The city that once felt so large now seemed distant, almost irrelevant, as they sat side by side. Maya found herself thinking about how transient their meeting was. How unlikely it seemed that two people from such different worlds could have found themselves in the same space, sharing something so meaningful. As the night turned into early morning, Maya felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. There was no rush, no need to explain anything, just a simple acknowledgement of the connection that had grown between them. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the pull to move on to the next adventure or to escape into the comfort of her usual routines. She felt present in the moment, and in that quiet hotel room, she was content. Before long, they both began to realize that sleep was inevitable. The room, still dim, felt safe, and Maya felt herself drifting off, her head resting on the pillow beside Alex. For a moment, she thought about what would happen when they parted the next day, whether they would simply go back to their respective lives, or whether this night would become a memory to treasure. But as she closed her eyes, she realized that it didn't matter. Sometimes, it's not about the future or what comes next. It's about the brief moments of connection that happen when two people find themselves in the same place at the same time. Whether it was love or something more fleeting, it was something special. In the stillness, Alex's presence beside her felt both comforting and grounding. She had never imagined her life would lead her to this moment, but now that she was here, she wouldn't change a thing. The night passed quietly, and when morning arrived, neither of them rushed to leave. There was no need for words to explain the unspoken bond they had shared. Both of them knew that sometimes the most profound connections are the ones that are felt, not necessarily understood. The moment had been theirs, and in that, it was enough. They parted ways with a quiet understanding, knowing that their paths might never cross again, but that this night, brief as it was, had meant something. Maya returned to her travels, her camera always ready to capture the world around her, and Alex continued to drive through the streets of the city, picking up passengers, but knowing deep down that there was one story from the night that would always stay with him. A reminder that even in the most unexpected moments, there was beauty and connection. As time passed, Maya continued her travels, but the memory of that quiet night in the hotel room lingered in her thoughts. It wasn't something she had planned for or expected, but it was a moment that stuck with her, a moment of true connection, however brief. Whenever she found herself in a new city, meeting new people, or exploring new places, a part of her always remembered the comfort of that night. She didn't dwell on it often, but there were moments, quiet ones, when the memories surfaced, reminding her of the way she had felt truly seen, understood, and at ease. On her travels, Maya encountered many different people, each leaving their mark in some small way. But none of those encounters ever quite matched the unexpected depth of that night with Alex. She wondered, sometimes, what it might have been like if they had spent more time together, if they had crossed paths at a different time in their lives. But she never allowed herself to linger on those thoughts for too long. She was a traveler, always moving, and she had made peace with the fact that some moments were meant to be short, fleeting, but still significant. Alex, for his part, also carried the memory of Maya with him. After their time together, he didn't reach out to her again. His life, like hers, was full of movement. He had his shifts to work, his routine to follow, and a city to navigate. But in the quiet of his car, during those long hours of driving, he would occasionally think of that night. He remembered the way she had listened so intently to his stories, how her laughter had filled the air between them, and how, in those moments, it felt as if the world outside had stopped. It wasn't often that Alex allowed himself to be vulnerable with a stranger, but something about Maya had made him open up in ways he rarely did. He realized that sometimes even the smallest connections could leave the biggest impacts. He continued driving, picking up passengers and chatting with them about trivial things, but in the back of his mind, there was always that quiet understanding, that shared silence between them. He couldn't help but wonder about the paths people took, how different lives intersected for a brief moment, and how those moments, even if short-lived, were enough to remind him of what really mattered. Months later, Maya returned to the city. She wasn't sure why she came back, or what she expected to find. Maybe it was a desire to revisit the places she had captured in her photographs, or the urge to see something familiar again. But as she walked through the streets, something in her heart told her to take the same route she had taken that night, through the winding roads and bustling streets. Her mind wandered, almost without thinking, and soon enough, she was standing on the same corner where Alex had picked her up all those months ago. She wasn't sure she was looking for something, or if she simply wanted to relive that fleeting moment of connection. She glanced around, half expecting him to be there, but of course he wasn't. She smiled to herself, realizing that life had moved on, and so had she. It was a chapter she hadn't expected, but one she would carry with her. As Maya turned to leave, a taxi slowed down beside her. Without thinking, she glanced at the driver. It was Alex. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Neither of them spoke immediately, but there was something in that look, an unspoken acknowledgement that they both remembered. The world around them carried on, but they shared something that felt like an eternal pause in time, a connection that didn't need to be spoken, just understood. Alex smiled, the same easy smile that had made her feel at ease all those months ago. "I didn't expect to see you again," he said, his voice calm and familiar. Maya's heart skipped a beat, and she smiled back. "I guess some moments just bring you back," she replied, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't realized she was searching for. For a moment, neither of them said anything more. It wasn't necessary. Sometimes, the most meaningful connections don't require a lot of words. They simply exist. They exchanged a few more quiet words, but before long, the moment passed, and the world around them continued to move forward. Maya waved goodbye and walked away, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. She didn't need anything more. The memory of that night, their brief time together, would remain a part of her journey, something she would carry with her as she moved forward, as a reminder that even the smallest moments of connection can shape our lives in ways we may never fully understand. And as Alex watched her disappear into the crowd, he felt a quiet contentment wash over him. He continued driving, the city bustling around him, But in that brief moment, he too had been reminded of the beauty in life's fleeting connections.